Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. Today we're talking about fandom and why maybe fandom is just part of being human. But before we get started with that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Travis.
Hi, my name is Travis Adams. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in pop culture with therapy. I predominantly work with veterans and active duty service members with PTSD from combat and various types of trauma.
Okay, Lynn?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University. And one of my research areas is the psychology of fandom. So I've written a lot of books on fandom. The most recent two written with the cast of Supernatural. So the actors all wrote chapters about their perspective on fandom and on being on a pop culture phenomenon like Supernatural.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, paranormal, male romance. But all the modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I've been a huge fan of a number of shows, starting with Dark Shadows through Star Trek, and I claim the title with pride of being an obsessed Supernatural fan. So, you know, people who are on the inside of fandom, those of us who go to conventions, who join fan groups, we get the benefit of what fandom can bring to the table. But outside of that, there's a lot of often askance views, fan shaming. You hear the term Disney adult thrown around with a great deal of joking, if not derision. So let's talk about what constitutes a fandom and why we're drawn to it. Travis?
I think there could be fandoms, everything. We were talking a little bit like TV shows, music, movies, sports teams. It's just a group of people that have the similar interests or similar like of something. And I feel like the biggest help for me, because I do love Disney, I do love Marvel and DC, Supernatural, obviously. It's a way to feel connected to other people, and I think that we as humans are a society that's based in community, and having a community that kind of understands us by having similar interests helps us feel more connected. Because in this world, it can be very isolating, very polarizing. So I think that having that security of connecting with others is really where um, the rubber meets the road when we talk about fandom.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, and I think, we mentioned different kinds of fandoms, and I think we often tend to think, oh, they're all very different. Like being a fan of a rock band or a Taylor Swift fan versus being a Supernatural fan or an X-Files fan or a Marvel fan versus being a fan of a football team or a basketball team. We tend to think of those as they must be really different, and the kind of people who are drawn to those things to be passionate about them must be very different. And the benefits that they're getting from being a fan of that particular thing is very different. But honestly, it really isn't. If you look at the research on the psychology of being a fan across all those different types of fandom, you see the same kind of benefits. You see the same kind of, as Travis mentioned, sense of community and belongingness that people get from just being with, whether virtually or in reality, with like-minded people who share a passion. It's pretty much the same. The difference comes, I think, in that some fandoms are much more accepted than others. My brother-in-law is a huge Eagles fan. We're in Philadelphia. Eagles are doing really well right now. Even I know that, even though I'm not a huge sports fan. Nobody raises an eyebrow when he spends an entire weekend day at the ballpark tailgating, and some of his friends like to paint themselves green and white and, kind of cosplay when they're going. Nobody thinks anything of that. But sometimes when people, cosplay to go to Comic-Con, or They wait in line for 6 hours at a Taylor Swift concert. Maybe those people get looked at a little more askance, but really it's the exact same thing that's happening and the same benefits that are coming from both of them.
Oh, I agree completely. I'm a Penn State alumni, and you want a diehard fandom of a sporting team. And then we lived in Pittsburgh for a decade, so go Steelers. And I realized that if I saw somebody else in a Penn State sweatshirt, literally anywhere in the world, and said, "We are," they're going to respond Penn State. Um, it's a knee-jerk thing. It's a family. It is a connection. And I agree, we give permission for some fandoms much more than others, and kind of look sideways at some of the other fandoms. But you know, the benefits I think are much more similar than there is anything different. Um, let's talk a little bit about what those benefits are. Travis?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I think that really it's feeling connected to other people. Having a seeing a supernatural tattoo or a T-shirt or a Spider-Man sweater, you automatically know a little bit about that person, so they're not stranger danger. They're like, okay, well, let me get to know this person a little more. Like I have a little bit of commonality with them, so I'm more willing to open up and explore that commonality and get to learn about people. I do the same thing with my practice as a counselor. I let them know that I started in the military, and since I work with all military, it allows them like immediately to have a little bit of rapport. We have some commonality, so they tend to open up a little bit faster. They're a little more receptive. When they walk into my office and they see it full of pop culture stuff, I mean, you got Yoda and Hulk right above me. Um, when they see that and they have similar interests, okay, this is another level that we can relate to, and we start going through those different things, connecting, building rapport, getting to know each other, but already having a predetermined foundation, I think really helps.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, I think Travis is absolutely right. And I also would agree that that's probably the biggest benefit of fandom. It's a little bit ironic because people who maybe have never been part of a fandom, part of the stereotype of being a fan is like a lonely person sitting by themselves in their mother's basement attached to a video game or something. Like that's one of the weird stereotypes of being a fan. And ironically, fandom is not an isolating experience at all. Fandom is a communal experience. It brings a great sense of belongingness. It, as you said, is something in common to start a relationship, and then the relationship goes from there. So we all, I'm sure, know countless people who have found their closest friends within a fandom, within that community. So I also would agree that that's the biggest benefit. Interestingly, I also think maybe the second biggest benefit, or the second way that people get to feel that sense of belongingness, is also a relational one, and that's through what they call the parasocial relationship. Again, a lot of stigma around that term. The original research back in the 1950s, believe it or not, by Horton and Wohl, who were psychologists, so in my field, um, very pathologizing, because they were really looking at sort of the tail end of the continuum of fandom. They were looking at what we call now celebrity worship, which is sort of obsessive worship of a celebrity. But the vast majority of fans are not at the end of that continuum. Fans are not delusional. They don't think that they are in some kind of secret relationship with a celebrity and the celebrity is sending them coded messages in their songs. Most fans, the vast majority of fans, are not like that. So the parasocial relationship, which is the relationship that a fan has with a celebrity or with a fictional character, obviously someone they don't know but feel like they know, that kind of one-way non-reciprocal relationship is called a parasocial relationship. It turns out that that actually can meet some of our belongingness needs too. It's basically an attachment relationship. So when we see familiar faces around us. Our brains are wired to attach to those familiar faces. Evolution goes slowly. Brains don't really draw a whole lot of distinction between somebody who's in your living room every day and somebody who's on your screen every day. So we develop attachment relationships with these parasocial partners, and that brings us a lot of good things. It brings us a sense of connection, it brings us a sense of safety and security, which is what attachment relationships are for. So it feels good to us when we have any kind of interaction with that parasocial partner, whether it's seeing them post on Instagram or going to a concert or getting an autograph at Comic-Con or going to a convention. That parasocial relationship actually brings a lot of happiness for people. So it's the belongingness that fans get from the fan community of fellow fans, and it's also that sense of belongingness and kind of inspiration and safety that they get from their parasocial partner too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the piece of found family within fandom is huge because you can't pick your family, but you can pick your fandom. And when you find the right fandom and the right groups within that fandom, it is tremendously supportive and nurturing. It can be just wonderful, especially, you know, when times are good, you've got people to party with and celebrate with and share something that you all love. And when times are bad, I have seen the fandom community rally, whether it's somebody who had a house fire or a bad diagnosis or car accident, and really pull together to make a substantive effort to help. And that's not uncommon. Fandom does take care of its own in many, many ways. So I think that found family is a huge piece. And I think that it's interesting again um, seeing how different people react and across different fandoms. When I was in middle school, a friend of mine was an absolute diehard fan of Roberto Clemente. And when Clemente's plane went down and he died, my friend grieved like it was a family member. He idolized this sports person so much and saw him so much as a role model, somebody he had never met. I don't know if he even ever went to a game in person, but that connection was real enough, although one-sided, that he, you know, grieved like he had lost a person that he actually knew. So it is a very real emotional bond. And it certainly can be extremely positive. Why do you think we get so much skepticism? I'll go back to that term that gets battered around, Disney adults, like, oh, look, they're not just taking the kids to the park, they're actually having fun too. Why do you think the fan shaming happens? Travis?
Insecurities. Really, what it boils down to me, I am a Disney adult, if that's what you want to call it. This board underneath my DSM is just full of Disney pins. I have an annual Magic Key. I go regularly, and something I love doing. And I do have people in my life that judge me for it. And you know what? I'm having fun. And they don't want to let go, and they don't want to have fun, and they think that everything should be serious all the time. And like at the end of the day, if I have a smile on my face and they're stressed out, I'm winning. It allows me to kind of detach from reality because I can deal with heavy stuff a lot in my work. So it gives me a space that allows me to escape that and just gives me some reprieve. I get to enjoy the things and really like it reminds me of better days. Excuse me. Reminds me of my childhood growing up in Anaheim, California, where I'm from. It reminds me of just these characters that I can see if I walk around Avengers Campus and see the MCU characters walking around and feel connected in those ways. And growing up and reading comic books and seeing them in real life, there's so many benefits to that. As well as going to a supernatural convention or Comic Con here in San Diego. All those things really help me feel uh, not just connected but appreciated for my interests.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big thing too. I have a good friend that So like, I don't understand how you know so much about like these fake characters, but he can remember every stroke from somebody playing golf. It's it's you have your interests, I have mine. I'm not judging you for it, and they often judge because they're fictional characters versus these are real people. But I know my characters more than you do yours most of the time. There's always some scandal that comes out in sports that is shocking, but the character that they're playing, who they are, and we don't necessarily always judge the character on screen by the actor that's playing that character. You know, so I think that's a part of it is people judge for these non-real, these fictional characters, and to me, it doesn't matter if they're fictional or not. It's something that brings my heart joy.
Oh yeah, get a diehard fan going on sports statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And they can just rattle this stuff off. And hey, if it makes you happy, go for it. It's not hurting anybody. Lynn?
Yeah, and as far as the fictional characters, I agree. I think that people tend to look more askance at parasocial relationships and knowing a lot about fictional characters, but there's some really interesting research called social surrogacy theory that finds that fictional characters that we see often that become very familiar to us, they can feel just like sort of close friends and family. We develop relationships with them, and they can bring that same sense of belongingness and a relief from stress and a relief from loneliness. This is backed up by research. So fictional characters, yeah, everybody knows they're fictional. No, fans are not deluded. They don't think that their favorite fictional character is going to walk in the door. They know it's a fictional character, but that doesn't take away the benefits and that sense of closeness. We can be inspired by them, we can relate to them, we can learn from them. Their stories become very real to us, and there's nothing unhealthy about that. I think one of the other reasons that people look askance at some types of fandom, especially, is that fandom is really a type of leisure. It's a type of play, closely related to play. And in a lot of cultures, certainly including this one that the three of us are embedded in the US, very anti-leisure, very anti-play, even though the benefits of leisure and the benefits of play are absolutely well known. There is a ton of research on it. We do know it's good for us, but we still kind of, look at it like, what are you doing? Why are you not being productive? And as soon as we think we're not being productive, we tend to feel guilty about taking that time to invest in leisure. There was some really interesting research earlier this year that showed all these benefits for leisure, like even physiological benefits, like it lowers your heart rate, it lowers your blood pressure, it gives your immune system a boost. Like we really, truly need leisure. But if somebody took that leisure time, whether fandom or anything else, and felt guilty about it, that reduced the benefits. So I wrote an article in Psychology Today about it because it's so important that we let ourselves, like Travis said, we let ourselves find joy in it. We let ourselves say, no, this is good for me. This is something that's actually helping me both physically and emotionally and mentally, and I'm going to do it because we get the most benefit from it when we don't fall into the trap of feeling guilty about it.
I
Well, no,
think you bring. Sorry,
no, go ahead.
some really good points. Because I talk about. I was doing a group last week with a bunch of combat vets. These guys were outside the wire, engaging in firefights and things like that. And I'm talking about values and trying to realign their lifestyle. And a lot of them didn't know you can value leisure or recreation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's such a judgment on it. I mean, usually when in our culture and many other cultures around the world, but especially in American culture, one of the first questions that you get asked when you meet somebody new, it's like, oh, hey, what do you do? Like your whole identity is wrapped up in your job. So I do my best to never ask that question. And even when it's asked upon me, I don't return that question. I ask some other type about like how they're actually doing today, right? And not allowing them to give me the BS answer of good. Good's on emotion, and it's not like that's a standard answer. Like, how are you actually doing? Or hey, are you having a really good time? What was the highlight of your day? things like that. And they really start to open up when they start hearing that. And when they ask how I'm doing, if I give an honest answer, again, just like the fandom, it opens the door to a more truthful relationship going forward.
Yeah, I think that one of the real benefits of fandom is not only the leisure, but the comfort. And that can be comfort derived from watching the same 327 episodes again for Supernatural fans, or any TV show, rereading a favorite book, listening to a favorite album. I mean, going to a concert for musicians that light up your life. There's a lot of comfort derived that presses all the right serotonin buttons to make you feel good and reduce stress. And at the last convention I was at, I had a photo op with um, Alex Calvert and Jensen Ackles. And I said, I want a squish hug because there is nowhere safer I can be than squished between God and Dean Winchester. And Jensen just threw back his head and laughed. And he said, you're not wrong. So, I know that they're not God and Dean Winchester, but it's the thought that counts. And so I think that that is very real. I also wonder sometimes when the fan shaming happens, if there isn't a good bit of misogyny thrown in there. Because if you look at the fandoms that are okay, like sports, including golf, or any of those things, they're very male oriented. But a lot of the other fandoms are mixed. You're going to see more women, although certainly not necessarily a majority of women, at a Comic-Con or a sci-fi convention. But it's certainly a mixed audience. And I wonder sometimes if that doesn't factor into like the Disney adult comment, oh, well, that's not macho enough. Hey, I'll put most people up against a Disney hero any day, and let's see whose butt gets whooped. Um, even the fluffy animals can probably do it. So I do wonder how much of that lurks in the background.
And
Now,
that makes sense too, because there's a lot of stuff I've been researching about and looking into about um, male stereotypes and role models, and how as young boys turning into men and going forward, you're rated on one of three things: how many sexual conquests you have, how much money, and how good you are at sports. And if we're not professionals, but we're watching professionals, are we supporting those professionals? And that's the masculine thing. And I showed this and I talked to this about my clients because I want them to show that, like, hey, you can cry like Dean Winchester, you can cry like Sam, and it doesn't take away from who you are. It doesn't take away from you save people, that you put yourself in danger. None of those things go away because you have emotion. You have a human condition of emotion, and that's okay.
yeah, very much so. Now, Supernatural came straight out and dealt with fan fiction authors and the whole concept of being a fan. And Becky, who was sort of our point person for that, kind of got an arc throughout the series from being, oh, you're so firm, the kind of crazy fangirl to standing up to God. Um, what do you think about what did that character arc um, tell the fans of the show, and what did we learn from it? Travis?
Like, especially as you see her still liking the show, right? She still makes her dioramas and stuff, and has
Mm-hmm.
her Etsy wares or whatever. But you can like the show, you can enjoy the show, you can be supportive of the show, and you can have a life outside the show, right? She didn't have much of identity before that, but then she met a guy and she had some kids and was married, and she got her alone time to take care of what she wanted to take care of. But she was also multifaceted, right? She wasn't just a crazed fan any longer. She had, she was a mom, and she got to have those types of things go on too. And I think that, as when we start to broaden our interests and connections and identity, really is what it comes down to. I think that's where you had her biggest growth, is that she became not just identity of a Supernatural fan, but of so many other things.
Mm-hmm. Lynn?
I think the Becky arc is a really interesting one, and I'm a big fan of some of it and not a big fan of other parts of it. And I'm just going to, for my purposes of talking about Becky, season 7, Time for a Wedding didn't happen because I don't know what that was, but that was not the Becky character that Eric Kripke created. So forget that one. But if you look at the Eric Kripke Becky episodes and then the late season Becky episodes when she came back, what I think is important about that, and it goes back to the misogyny that you were just talking about, because there's a lot of pressure on women, even more than men. There's certain pressures on men that Travis was just talking about that I think are very valid and can be very painful and can result in male fans getting stigmatized as well. But the pressures on women are even stronger to the only thing you're really socially supported, culturally supported in doing is taking care of a family, taking care of a man, taking care of children. Those are the things you're supposed to be doing. And if you're, God forbid, doing something for yourself that is not directly benefiting them, like going to a fan convention or a concert or whatever it is, even a sporting event, by the way, women, well, who's watching the kids? They might be asked if they're tailgating at a sporting event all day long. So there's a lot of pressure. I think that the culmination of the Becky arc did have a nice balance in that Becky was still, as Travis just said, absolutely still a fan. She was still engaging in fandom creatively, making dioramas. She kept fandom stuff that was important to her. Like, there was no sense of her saying, oh, pff, all that silly stuff, I gave all that stuff up because now I'm doing what culturally I'm supposed to be doing because I have a husband and family. I did have a little bit, despite also being a parent with a family, I did have a little bit of, is this where we have to take her? That, oh, the only way that she can be redeemed is if she has a husband and family. But I don't think that was meant to be the message. I hope the message was supposed to be, hey, fans are full functioning people. We can be passionate fans and we can also maybe have a family or have a partner, or we cannot have a family and a partner and still be passionate fan. We can be the whole, run the gamut, and that should be okay. I think that was the message that they were trying to send. And from the beginning, Kripke was also sending the message. Yeah, he poked fun at Becky, at fandom, at everything, because that's what Kripke does. And he does it with affection every time. But he also showed Becky from the very beginning, hey, she's also smart and she can save the day because she's got information. Her obsessive understanding and knowledge about Supernatural, oh, that might actually save the day. And maybe the ultimate Kripke comment, Chuck, aka Kripke in the series, actually has a relationship with Becky. So, how much more complimentary can you get of what you think of fans than I like them enough to actually be in a relationship with them? So, all in all, I like the Becky arc, other than let's forget that middle part. It didn't happen.
Well, and I think about the two non-Becky fandom episodes, fan fiction with the musical and the Real Ghostbusters with the convention, and how we see Sam and Dean be won over in both cases by the fandom that they initially feel uncomfortable with and want to dismiss. By the end of the musical, Dean is going, you put all the sub in that text you can. And they're very, they see themselves in it. You see that moment when they hear Carry On and maybe for the first time relate it to themselves. But there's an appreciation. And that's validating as a fan watching that and going, hey, the characters probably wouldn't hate us. But then with the Real Ghostbusters, the convention, it's two of the fans that help them save the day. And it's a nice shout out, nice nod that the fans are capable, even if what draws them together is the fandom itself. And I've seen that so much in terms of fandoms and fan conventions being a haven, especially sometimes for people who may be maybe going through some stuff, may be neurodivergent and um, need to connect with people over a shared interest. Man, you get some fans who are into statistics talking to each other, and the world just melts away around them. They'll be there all day. You'll just bring them food because they're in their happy place and they're just going to keep going. And that's perfectly okay. But sometimes you have to go to a special place to find other people who hear that and who get the things you get. And fandom often provides that. Um, Now, we've also seen you know, a lot of pop culture tends to play up the bad fan. I'm thinking of Misery, the Stephen King book, where the obsessed fan traps the writer of her favorite writer and tries to kill him. And that does come up as a theme. Um, where does that play into the whole thing? Because, you know, somehow again, that never happens to sports fans. Travis?
I mean, I think that even with sports fans, people do get a little obsessive. Now, is it scary obsessive? I don't know, because a lot of these guys are, with sports, they're very masculine guys. They're bigger, muscular. They have a lot more money than the average uh, fan, so they have more protection and more boundaries, right, between the two. But I do think that it does happen. Um, I'm just trying to figure out, like, when it comes, like, the dark side of fandom. I mean, I feel like if we look at the statistics thing we were just talking about, the statistics of that are 0.000 something, right? So rare, and it's often linked to other types of mental health
Mhm.
disorders. It's not necessarily a fandom, but maybe some type of psychosis, where they're living in this false reality of theirs, that they developed other meanings or other deeper connections that aren't necessarily there. So I don't think that it really applies to fandom, but some other type of underlying condition that is just amplified, because typically those types of people do isolate. They do tend to be more alone. So they find these parasocial relationships that Lynn was talking about earlier to connect to, and it starts to develop something more that's not necessarily always there. So to me, that's kind of it's a hard thing to talk about, because there's so many other underlying conditions that can play a role into that.
Yeah, it's sort of the difference between the social gamer and the guy who never leaves the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, it's that continuum. It goes back to that continuum, and the people who are, the social entertainment end of the continuum are way more numerous than the people at the obsessive celebrity worship delusional end of the continuum. So while they of course like to make movies about it and they're very compelling, and the cases that we do hear when a fan becomes obsessed with someone and acts out in some way, obviously that's going to make the news. So it kind of seems more common than it actually is. Does it happen? Sure, but Travis is right. I think usually it's because there's some underlying psychopathology going on. There's fans that lose their sense of reality. There's accountants that lose their sense of reality. It just happens across humanity. I think what I worry about more, and where you more often see the dark side of fandom, is fans treating each other poorly, because fans are groups, and group dynamics tells us that there are going to be in groups and out groups. One of the way an in group becomes cohesive is by identifying an out group or an enemy. And when fans are really invested in their favorite show, celebrity, team, whatever it is, doing well, that's really compelling. They call it basking in the reflected glory. When your television show or your favorite character or your favorite singer or team or whatever it is doing well, you get psychological benefits from that too. Your self-esteem goes up. You feel a sense of vicarious achievement. So you want to hang on to that, and you can get really aggressive with anyone or anything that seems like they might be a threat to that and might knock your fave off their pedestal in some way. So it's why we have shipping wars, and it's why we have fans vilifying other fans and saying, my fandom is better than your fandom, or my ship is better than your ship, or my character is better than your character. And I'm always dismayed when fans are willing to be really cruel to other fans, real people in their real life fan communities, over some of these in group, out group disputes. So to me, that's really the more common kind of dark side of fandom.
Okay. Now, going into the new year, there's going to be a lot of change. There's a lot of stress. People are very anxious. People are kind of wondering what's going to happen. People are kind of looking for a safe space. How can fandom help people navigate the uncertainty that is heading toward us at the speed of a bullet train? Travis?
I mean, I think that we can find certainty in our fandoms, right? We know the 327 episodes. We know which ones have the trickster, right? We know which ones, if that's somebody you like, or when he's acting as Loki, we know which ones are the meta episodes that we enjoy, the ones that are kind of safety blankets, right? Those are the ones that we can really feel connected with. So yeah, there is uncertainty in the world, and finding some safe space, finding some normalcy, finding something that's just comforting, right? I've introduced Supernatural to people, and they didn't like horror, and now it's their comfort show. It's on anytime I walk into their house, and that's just a given. And the reason for that is because it is a really good show, and it is comforting. And and this individual struggles with anxiety, so having something that they know what's going to happen kind of alleviates some of the anxiety they have in their life, which is also nice. They finished watching the series introduced last year. They've watched it 2 full times now, and on the third. It's nonstop except for like until a new season of The Boys or until a new season of something else. Because now they're open minded. They actually had a conversation with Lynn, and Lynn encouraged them to like the violence in The Boys is so over the top that it's okay, and that inspired her to watch it, and she loved it. Um, so, but like having those things, I think is really helpful for us
Okay.
because the world is uncertain. So finding the things that you can feel comforted with, that you know what's going to happen, that helps.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, I think two aspects of fandom can be really helpful when you are facing a time of uncertainty and anxiety, which I think we all are. One is that what we've been talking about this whole time, which is fandom gives you that support system, gives you that community. The more stress and anxiety and uncertainty that we're facing, the more we need to have supportive people around us. And for many of us, we find those supportive people within our fan communities, and they become some of the most important people to us. It used to be thought that a support person had to be sort of face to face kind of relationship, but now there's research that shows that a virtual community can also provide a tremendous amount of support. So, whether it's in person or virtual, a fandom can bring that support system. And then the other thing I just thought of when I was listening to what both of you were just saying is that another really important and powerful mechanism is nostalgia. And when people are facing times of uncertainty, we are really drawn to kind of tap back into things that were important to us in our past. So whether that's, Supernatural that you started watching in 2005 and has been part of your life for 20 years, or it's the baseball team that you went to games with your parents when you were a little kid and you followed this whole time, or whether it's, going back and listening to your old Beatles albums or Rolling Stones albums or whatever was around a long time ago. Nostalgia can feel really, really good. It actually mentally transports you into your past and kind of puts you in touch with an earlier version of yourself. In an existential sense and in a psychological sense, that feels really good. It's like a sense of self-continuity that, okay, I'm still that person that I was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever it was. That sense of self-continuity is really good for us. So it feels really reassuring and comforting and kind of grounding to go back and revisit those things that we feel nostalgic about. And fandom's often a part of that too.
Well, folks, we have blown through our time. So before we wrap up, I'd like to give everybody a chance to say where we can find you online. Travis?
I don't really have an online presence. I do like doing these panels with you. I contribute to the book series. I wrote for Lynn's book, Soups Ain't Always Heroes, with the boys. I've wrote for this supernatural psychology, and stuff like that. So I just love doing these and panels at comic conventions and in-person stuff.
Okay, Lynn?
You can find me on pretty much all social media at FangasmSPN. And if you're looking for the books, some of which Travis mentioned that he's contributed to, some of which Gail's contributed to, including the ones that have chapters from the Supernatural actors, you can find them at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever books are sold. And you can find more information and links at the website peacewhenyouaredone.com.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All my books are on Amazon. And I also run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, so as well as Continual. So I'm pretty easy to find if you're looking. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.